Today, every day, small cap investors visit Agoracom knowing this is the day to discover the world's next great company, to have their dreams come true. That's why I take to the open road, to find them, to tell their stories, to engage them, to bring them to life, because they want to connect with you from your office, your phone, your home, anywhere. Agoracom, find your dream.
Welcome to Beyond the Press Release, a production of Agoracom, in which we take the time to speak with small cap executives right after big news. And today is a doozy. It's a big one. It's out of PyroGenesis Canada that trades on the TSX Venture Exchange under the stock symbol PYR. For our friends in US, PYRNF. For our friends in Germany on the Frankfurt under 8PY. With us again, Peter Pascali. He's president and CEO of the company. Now, for those of you who are new to the story, quick summary, this is a TSX Venture company, TSX Venture 50 company. It's a world leader in advanced plasma processes. They're achieving global success in multiple applications with some of the world's biggest companies and organizations. Now, more than just lip service, the technology, their plasma torch technology is used on U.S. aircraft carriers, has been successfully tested by DARPA, which is the military research arm of the U.S. Armed Forces. Their titanium powders for advanced 3D printing have received major orders, including a big mutual exclusive supply agreement with one of Europe's best, largest, and oldest companies in the industry. And the company was just nominated for the second year in a row, Materials Company of the Year, 3D Printing Industry Awards. That's just the tip of the iceberg, but that's what we're here to talk about. The company today announced, I'm going to read the press release, PyroGenesis board approves PyroGenesis additive spinoff and considering uplisting to a senior exchange. Peter, welcome to the show. Welcome back, my friend.
Always exciting to be here, George. Thanks for having me again.
Well, you know, we got to have you on because you keep putting out fantastic news. You hit it out of the park in early 2019, and here you are again, announcing a spin out effectively and uplisting to senior exchange. Before we get into the details, how big is this news for the company? How big is this for you guys and for your investors?
George, it's simply it can't get better than this as far as I'm concerned in terms of news. It's a conclusion from all the recent news press releases we've had. It's amazing.
So let's get to some of the details. You know, I've always said PyroGenesis is an oxymoron in that it's a small cap conglomerate. You've got plasma torch with the military. You've got solar. You've got DrawStrike. You've got 3D printing, on and on. So to a lot of us, it was almost a long time coming. When are we going to start to break apart this conglomerate? Let's talk about the factors that led to you finally making this decision. So the first one is, what's the benefit to your shareholders?
Well, the simpler we can become, George, to understand by analysts or investors, the better it is. Right now, PyroGenesis group of technologies is very complicated, as you alluded to just now. We have the U.S. military, we have mining metallurgy, we have 3D printing. So right now, we believe that the 3D printing has matured to a stage where we can effectively spit it off, so it's a standalone entity and becomes a lot more simpler to analyze and invest in.
Are you, I guess your board is assuming that you're going to be able to unlock value. You're not getting true value for the 3D printing side of the business.
Exactly.
Pyro?
Exactly.
How about, is it too early to ask what would the financial benefit be? I'm presuming you don't have the answer yet, but it'd be some kind of dividend or return of capital to the shareholders of the existing PyroGenesis. We
haven't decided that yet, but right now, it looks like it will be a dividend to existing investors.
By focusing on 3D, by creating, I'm going to call it 3D Nuco for now, because I'm presuming, unless you have a name for it.
Well, actually, it's PyroGenesis additive.
Oh, okay.
Go to. And actually, George, we've been operating as a separate company, a virtual company, if you will, within PyroGenesis for quite some time now.
All right, so PyroGenesis additive, by making this move, how much more, I want to talk about two groups, how much more attractive do you become, first of all, to large funds, you know, around the world globally, because obviously you're a global company, the US market. Do you think this makes you more attractive as a spin out?
Very much so, because they're funds that are interested. There's a large pools of money that are available for investing in additive manufacturing as an industry, as a space. However, there's a reluctance to commingle these funds with other business lines such as environmental or mining and metallurgy, arguably lines that they have absolutely no interest in or can't understand. So by separating it out, it enables analysts who know the industry to give that segment full value, and for funds to invest in that would otherwise have been prevented or precluded from investing in because it's commingled with other business lines that they're not interested in investing in.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense, because it seems like so many funds out there are specialized now.
Yeah.
And they might love the 3D printing, but they have no idea what the plasma torch or the DROSrite is all about. They have no way to analyze that, value that, so they'd be taking a higher risk. So that makes a lot of sense. How about within the industry? Let's talk about strategic investors within the industry. You want to partner with companies, maybe want to fund you or be part of your growth.
Well, certainly, that's huge. There are groups that may want to invest in us or partner with us, and what we have to do is articulate the sandbox in which they're playing better. They're very interested in supporting that plasma additive or the PyroGenesis additive. However, again, they don't want to be involved or care about what we're doing with U.S. Navy. They don't want to be at risk that something should happen in another business line that they have no interest in and affect PyroGenesis additive. So if we can articulate what PyroGenesis additive is, who the players are, and the business in there, it most certainly will attract strategic investors and possibly people who are interested in acquiring a piece of it or all of it.
So to summarize, is it safe to assume that you're pretty confident that, I mean, the PyroGenesis additive has already been growing tremendously. You put out an unbelievable press release in the last 12 months. Just the 2 nominations speak for themselves. But do you think that as a completely standalone company that you can actually accelerate the company's growth and development?
Almost certainly, without a doubt, George. I mean, we announced on January 8th a mutually exclusive arrangement with a multi-billion-dollar company. Subsequent to that, we announced a new powder production process called NextGen. And we announced that we had production capabilities that blew through any public announcements with respect to powder production. We then announced that we used it to produce a particular powder for a government agency. And then we announced that we did it for titanium and maintain those production rates and capabilities. So all this news is very big news and would be better announced in a standalone company.
Yeah, and that makes sense. It's just too mature. It's different if you're incubating all these companies, but there comes a point when your children grow up and one by one they leave for better pastures, bigger pastures. So
that's it.
That's great. And I'm actually going to ask you about the rest of the companies at the end because I have a kid. But let's stick with this. Second part of your press release is uplisting. You talked about you actually say you're going to be uplisting to a more senior exchange. So let's talk about, first of all, would that be for the additives company, the new company, PyroGenesis Additive, or would it be for both PyroGenesis Additive and PyroGenesis?
It's a good question. I mean, the advice we've been getting from investment bankers so far has been uplist first, spin out second.
Okay, so uplist the entire current company.
That's the initial advice we've been getting over the past few weeks. So, and both of these decisions have basically speak to the same thing. What we want to do is get attention from funds that and strategic partners that otherwise would not be interested.
Your TSX Venture company, TSX Venture 50, which means you've achieved you're the cream of the crop as far as the TSX Venture goes. But even the TSX Venture, I'm sure, is there for you guys to grow and move on. So if you're going to do that in North America, I can only think of 2 exchanges: TSX Big Board and/or NASDAQ. Any preferences yet? Any early favorites as to which way you might be going?
I think clearly a company, if it could go on the NASDAQ, is probably the choice of the 2. There's pros and cons with respect to both. I won't go into them now, but there are pros and cons. But effectively, the cost of an uplisting is pretty close on both. The only difference is ongoing costs. The one that comes to mind immediately is on the NASDAQ. You have significant directors and officers liability insurance sometimes 10 times more than it is in Canada. So those are the type of things we look at. But then again, the audience in the United States is significantly larger.
Sure.
Their appetite for risk is significantly higher, and also their ability to understand what we're doing. With all due respect, I mean, when we go around in Canada and say we're on the U.S. aircraft carrier, they think it's another boat. But when you go to the United States, they know it's probably it's the highest tech platform. Immediately, when we say we're on the U.S. aircraft carrier, we get immediate credibility. Yeah, so it's just a different audience, and there's a cost to each, and we have to weigh the pros and cons of staying in Canada or uplisting into the States. Uplisting to the States also ticks the box. We want to be attractive. We want to increase our attraction to Canadian funds that are precluded from investing on the tsx-v. So by doing an uplisting to NASDAQ, we tick that box as well. So we're looking at all the options and moving forward with both an uplisting and a spinoff.
Most likely with either of those, you probably have to do some kind of a rollback potentially. Just because I know the NASDAQ, I'm not sure about the TSX, you have to have a minimum $3-4 price threshold.
Yes.
Is that a concern for you guys doing a rollback? It's not for me, but what do you guys think?
Well, my background's in finance, George, and I don't typically like rollbacks when I hear about it in a company. Typically, companies will do it just for the optics, get a higher stock price, and hopefully that will garner interest. So if you look at the statistics, when you look at rollbacks like that, unless you're doing it for a reason beyond just the rollback, in other words, there's news, there's profitability, there's relationships, there's all sorts of things of this nature. A rollback in and of itself, in my opinion, is a waste of time. It has to be, I don't know what you think, but it has to be in conjunction with something significant taking place, coinciding with the rollback. Well, otherwise, it's just smoke and mirrors.
Well, I know in the small cap world, rollbacks 98%, 95% of the time take place because small cap companies have been decimated. Their business plan didn't work out. They need, they're a widget company, and now they're going to go into cannabis or something. So they do a 100-to-1 rollback just to clean up the share structure, nuke everything and start from scratch. That's why I think a lot of people get scared of rollback sometimes. But on the flip side, I've seen my personal experience over 20 years. When a rollback is done, in order to graduate to another exchange, in order to make the company's capital structure more attractive because it's growing in the business, then it's always has at the very least neutral or what I've seen, great success, because that in fact is what happens. Structure's cleaned up and you're more attractive to funds that you weren't even eligible to reach before. That's a big one, right?
Exactly, George.
Right now you're not even eligible to so many funds all over North America, let alone the world.
Yeah. So that's exactly what I'm speaking to, and not to talk too much detail, but if we did a rollback, I pick a number, let's say 10-to-1, we'd have like a $6-7 stock with a float of about 10 to 50 million shares. That's a respectable position for the NASDAQ, as opposed to being a $6 stock with over 100 million shares. Or a 60-cent stock with 10 million shares. I mean, if you have a $6 stock, $9 million stock, 10 to 50 million shares, that's a respectable offer. That's a respectable position in NASDAQ. Anyways, as you can see, there's been a lot of thought being given to it. We didn't just come out of the blue and say, guess what? This is what we're thinking of. There's been a lot of discussions taking place. There's been a lot of thought, and we thought it was about time to press release it. And I'll tell you why, George, I press release these type of things. Oftentimes it's to protect my existing investor base who have bought shares and have confidence in the company. I think it's prudent that they know that these things are taking place, because you wouldn't want them to sell not knowing that this is imminent. And now it's getting to a position where a lot of people are starting to discuss it internally with professionals, investment bankers. We're getting proposals. And now it's gone out a little bit beyond the circle that I consider to be tight, and it has a higher probability of getting into the marketplace, people buying, although it may be illegal.
It happens, so it happens.
That happens. So I don't want my existing investor base selling into the people who are more knowledgeable than them. That's just not fair. So I thought that's the reason why we press release these type of things, George, at this particular time as well.
And one thing, actually, essentially, that you brought that up, you had actually announced this, you'd first announced this a few years ago, and then didn't go through with it back then. What changed then? What changed today?
Well, when we announced this a couple of years ago, what you're talking about is the spinoff.
Right.
We were gung ho. We were going to do the spinoff, and all of a sudden things changed in the marketplace. GE made certain acquisitions, which made us have to step back and look at it again, because it effectively disrupted the supply chain of something that we were going to offer in the marketplace. And then our system was also almost up and running. So we decided, let's wait for that, because it reduces the concern in the marketplace, or the questions in the marketplace. So we got to that. And then we saw that we were near a contract, a key contract, or a strategic relationship. And once we nailed that, we said, okay, we're here now. This is where we want to be. All these delays, George, hasn't been associated with us reconsidering. It's because the marketplace changed so quickly for us that I don't think it's prudent for us just to go continue to do something because we press released it. We have to look at what's happening in the marketplace as we're moving forward and see how we can structure it to get the best value for the investor base. And that's what we've done. In fact, I challenge anybody to find a better time to go to spin off than between the time we announced it and now. And so there has been delays, but they're very, very understandable, and all have worked to the benefit of our current shareholder base.
And Peter, to your point, actually, since you say that, we've all seen IPOs, like major IPOs backed by Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, going on the NASDAQ, that they've been announced over the last couple of years. You see these announcements, and then suddenly a company says, because of changes in the marketplace, we're delaying our IPO. So if you've got major, billion-dollar valuation companies backed by Goldman Sachs who announce IPOs and then will announce a delay because something going on in the marketplace, I don't think it's unreasonable that you did the same thing. Like you said, prudence dictated that you, in fact, call that audible and wait to see what the picture was. So
exactly.
If that was the reason before my time with you, then I think that's a great reason. Let's talk about timing. What does the timeline look out for? So now we know from what you told us earlier, you want to uplist first and then do the spin out. What does the timeline look like for each of those ballpark? I know you don't have specifics yet, but can you give everyone at home?
Yeah. George, just to be clear, we haven't decided whether we're going to uplist and spin, or spin and then uplist. It's okay. still, but just to be sure, the advice we've been getting so far makes sense that we should uplist and then spin off. But
that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense to me as well.
Time frame. I've been told that each one of them could take between 4, 5, 6 months, but it both require regulatory approval. So depending on what the questions and answers going back and forth, there may be certain delays, but we definitely want to do this as soon as possible and could possibly do both within 2019. However, if we don't, I fully expect that one will be done in 2019 and the other in Q1 2020. Quite imminent. Now, obviously, the proviso is that we have the funds to do it lined up, because it does cost some money, even though a lot of the expenses are back-ended.
Due diligence, auditors, all those are big expenses when you want them.
So assuming the funds are lined up and continuing, and that we have a normal interaction with the regulatory bodies, and I see no reason why not. It's relatively simple. We're not that complex when it comes to that. So I see no reason at this stage that we would not be able to get both nailed in 2019.
All right, let's talk about what I alluded to earlier. So what happens to the rest of PyroGenesis? You still have the military side. You still have Drostrike. You still have solar. You've got what happens to the rest of that company? The PyroGenesis versus PyroGenesis additive. What goes on?
It's very exciting, George, because when you look at what we have an environmental side, which the cornerstone there is the military for right now, and we have a mining and metallurgy component, each of which could stand alone, conceivably down the road could stand alone. Now, what it does is with the spin out of the additive manufacturing is it makes the other two a lot more easier to analyze. There's an environmental component to both the mining and metallurgy and the environmental military. There's an environmental component to both of them. In fact, our press release, which we announced recently, we're developing a torch. We sold a torch to Sweden to basically possibly replace diesel burners in iron ore metallization, which essentially is a sexy way of describing concentrating iron ore before it's transported. That's in our mining and metallurgy segment. However, it has an environmental segment, a component to it as well. So that's a lot easier to analyze, those two business segments, as a standalone once additive manufacturing is spun out. But in of themselves could stand alone down the road as well.
Safe to say, it looks like, if I had to guess looking forward, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, but it almost seems like, you know, PyroGenesis has become this incubator where it's only a matter of time till, you know, maybe the next one goes out and the next one goes out, because you are making great advancement. Just the DROSRITE one alone has global implications with potential global partners. So, well, I guess the answer is wait and see, but I want to ask you, you know, what happens to the reigning company. Last question for you, because we've done a ton of work here and we could probably talk a lot more about it, but we're going to wait until you announce more details to the world. You know, last words to you. What does the rest of this year look like for PyroGenesis? You're going to be obviously busy, you know, with this uplist and or spin out, depending on what you do first. How does the rest of the company look? How does the rest of the company operate? And what, you know, how does everything look going forward?
Well, it looks very exciting, George. I mean, you look at our backlog that we've announced, you add it to the imminent U.S. Navy double order for 2 systems. That brings us somewhere in the order of $20 million of backlog, if you include the military in the backlog right now. We are going to be delivering the torch I described to Sweden towards Q3, Q4 of this year. DROSRITE is kicking off. It's very exciting time in terms of just the business side of it. What's happening out of manufacturing is off the charts. We've come so far so quickly, and our relationship with our partner out of Europe is really pushing us faster than we can keep up with. So that's
good news. That's good news.
So in closing, from my perspective as a CEO personally, as I said earlier, it cannot get better than this. I'm so excited. I'm so fortunate to be leading this team. And 2019 is the beginning of, you know, great things to come. We've alluded to them in the past, and they're here. We're here now, speaking of them.
Well, Peter, speaking of someone who's been in this business for 22 years, I've seen over 300 clients. I've seen thousands of potential companies to look at, invest in, work with. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to tell everyone at home, you're in the 99th percentile. Most companies find it very difficult to get off the ground. A small sliver of companies, a good, you know, decent sliver of companies are fortunate enough to have one good operating line, one good, you know, division, one good operation, and you've got multiples, and you're now spinning out one of those. So I know that doesn't happen alone. You've got a great team there, so congrats to you and your team, and looking forward to having you back on many more times in 2019, because it sounds like we're going to have a lot to talk about.
And just to underscore that, it's the team that's behind me. I know I'm the face. I come on these interviews. If we could, we'd have 80 people behind me in these interviews, but we can't. It's really the team that makes the company, and I am working with a very unique team, and I'm very happy to be their leader.
Well, that's signs of a great leader when you're given when you're given credit to where credit's due. Thanks for joining us today, Peter. For everyone at home, thanks for watching. Today was a very big day, very big announcement from PyroGenesis. If you know the company, then you're excited and you know where to do your due diligence. For those of you who are new to the company, and that's going to be a lot of you, especially with this news coming out, get to Agoracom, punch the company's name or stock symbol, do your due diligence. We got the profile section, read through that. Watch, Peter and I have done a dozen interviews. You know, watch the last 4 or 5 just to see how everything Peter's talked about has come through. And then once you've done that due diligence, you're going to have questions. Get onto the CEO verified forum that we have for PyroGenesis on Agoracom. Ask your questions, and you're going to have Peter most likely answer those questions. And to me, when a company gives that kind of access to people, to the public, to shareholders, that tells me a lot about the company's confidence and where it's going. So take advantage of those tools, and maybe you'll be a part of the PyroGenesis story going forward.
George, nobody answers those questions other than me.
There you go. Straight from the CEO's mouth. No proxies, no ghostwriters. That's coming straight from Peter. So take advantage, everyone. Thanks for joining us. To everyone who's been the part of the PyroGenesis story for the last couple of years while we've been here, congratulations to you. A major milestone, and looking forward to much more success together. Have a great day and see you next time.